Welcome to Backus Health Beat. Today we're here to talk about a very tragic incident that occurred relatively close to home in Newtown, Connecticut. It was a shooting at an elementary school where many people were injured, and it's impacted people throughout Connecticut. We have here with us today Dr. James O'Day, a vice president at Backus and a clinical psychologist. Jim, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to this event on television, in the radio, in newspapers, and many parents are going to be wondering what is appropriate to say to children and when. Can you give us any advice on this?
I can. First off, let me say that the thoughts and the prayers of the physicians and staff at Backus Hospital are entirely with the community in Newtown and all of the families who have been affected by this tragedy. First and foremost, I think it's important, Sean, that people remember to limit their exposure to this information. The emotional circumstances that come up when people are watching this on TV over and over again can be emotionally devastating and overwhelming. And I would very much emphasize that the extent to which people can limit exposure to these traumatic images is very wise. As we think a little bit about our children, we should think about them at different developmental stages. And of course, there's no hard and fast rule to this, but for younger children, and I think around the ages of 9 or 10 years old, the prudent thing to do, if at all possible, is to really limit their exposure entirely. We should be making efforts to insulate younger children from this information because it is simply too overwhelming for them to deal with.
What if the child is under 9 or 10 years old and they ask you a question? What do you do then?
And that's likely to happen. Kids, as much as we try to insulate them from this information will be available to them. And we need to listen, listen, listen. I think kids are going to have questions, and what we want to do is to provide a space where they can talk about their feelings and reactions to this. And then importantly, reassure, and reassure our children about the many steps that our communities and our schools take to ensure their safety.
Schools are actually one of the safest places you could be, so I think that's really, really important. If a child actually does watch television or does read a story or does have exposure to some sort of media, how should that be handled? I mean, not alone, I assume.
Yeah, I think we want to be close to our kids in this period in time. I think we want to recognize that kids shouldn't be left to their own devices in front of a TV set so that they can find this information themselves. I think we want to create an opportunity where we can listen to their fears and anxieties and the thoughts that they may have. And then again, we want to reassure them about the efforts that all of our schools and our communities take to ensure their safety. I'd like to emphasize, it may be hard to believe today because we're so close to this community here in Connecticut. These are extremely rare events. And because we're close to this community, we're probably going to hear more about it in our local media. It's important that we emphasize to our children that these events, extremely, extremely tragic events, are extremely rare, and it is not likely that they will be exposed to these kind of things ever in their lives. And so we want to reassure them that they are safe and that the communities that they live in, with the police and the first responders and their school administrators, are taking great strides to make sure to ensure their safety.
That's a really, really important point. I think what sets this incident apart maybe from Columbine or the Aurora movie shootings is that for us here in Connecticut, I mean, this is really right in our backyard, and also we're talking about an elementary school, which is, very rare. And so there's a lot of, I think both of us are parents, and a lot of us are wondering, specifically, what are some pointers in terms of talking with our children when we go home tonight, and really for the days that follow.
Yeah, I think again, it's important to listen more than talk. It's very common that as adults we want to talk about these things with our kids, and it's more important, frankly, that we listen and we provide the space for them to tell us where they are. If we're effective at that, I think good basic parenting skills listening to your kids, reassuring them, limiting the exposure that they have to this material through the media, and then sticking with a routine, going about the normal activities that you and your family are scheduled to do in these times with a mindfulness and a thoughtfulness to the people who have been affected by this tragedy. But I think it's important that we stick with a regular structure, that you stick with a routine, that you limit exposure, and that you reassure your kids in the ways that we can as parents.
Dr. O'Day, those are all really important points, and I think that's going to help many people. If in fact, some children fall through the cracks or people don't heed this advice, what could be the long-term ramifications to a child if these habits aren't followed?
Well, again, I think there's an abundance of resources in our schools for guidance counselors and other counselors in school, and I can assure you the things that are happening right now is that schools are mobilizing their resources to provide the supports to their children in their respective communities. And I'm confident that the local communities are coming together, as we know we do when we're in crisis, and coming together to support the communities, the families that have been affected by this tragedy.
Well, again, thank you very much, Dr. O'Day, for being with us today, and we hope that everybody is able to follow through with much of what Dr. O'Day has said, and good luck to everyone, and our hearts are with everyone impacted in Newtown and across the state at this time.